Okay, this is for everybody that is live, that's here now, and it's not your contribution.
Well, we're here today to protest a bold-faced lie that was told by the Liberal government that they were going to change the voting system. They proclaimed real change, and they actually promised about this electoral reform 1,800 times, I should say. So they made it, and right until the very end they were promising. So to go back on that now is an affront to democracy.
What do you hope will happen from today's action?
Well, I hope that the Liberal government will recognize that people do care about democracy, that we do care about having effective representation. That's not the same as when you can go out and cast your vote and know that it may or may not count toward representing you. Almost half of all votes are wasted in our system, and we know down south their system is broken too. So we need to call them on this.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, this isn't the first time the Liberal government has done this. 100 years ago, when women got the vote, they also, shortly after, went out and protested to make sure that vote was going to be effective. And the Liberal Prime Minister at the time, Mackenzie King, promised to do proportional representation because that's what the evidence shows is the most fair. But he went back on that. So it's the same old here in Canada. 100 years doesn't change much as far as the patriarchy, and we need to fight for the right to have effective representation.
Thank you.
Time we say the time that we do things is the time it needs to be done. And I guess this is a time to first acknowledge again Treaty 6 territory, which I'm not part of the Treaty 6 agreement. I'm part of Treaty 8 agreement. And I've yet to decide to figure out how that works across the land in regards to my ability to voice my concerns for my family or myself and those who are my descendants. So there's a lot of things to figure out. And when we talk about promises, as Indigenous people, promises are something that we hold in sacredness, and that we say when you promise someone, when you give word, it's not to the human being that you're given the word. You're given the word to Creator, Spirit, those on the other side. And you're giving your word to those yet to be born. And today's funeral as it were, in regards to electoral reform, also speaks of the false promises made at different levels from different governments towards the Indigenous people of the land. And for us, it's a time of grief and a time of mourning, in the sense that we had a flicker of hope. We had that flame ignited within us that we thought our vote would make a difference, that would be heard finally, and we'd be validated, and we'd be acknowledged as a people Indigenous to this land and having some say in what goes on in this land. And like you who are attending here today, those false promises hit hard and they hurt. And we know that it resonates at a different level, not just within our communities, but in a global sense, it resonates. And I really pray and hope that leadership anywhere understands, don't make promises you can't keep. Just don't do it. Because all you do is create a sense of hopelessness within people. All you do is create a sense of chaos, and all you do is hurt individuals who've had faith in that word promise.
I speak today as a Canadian citizen, someone who's grown up in this country, who loves this country. It's a place that we all share as our home. For the whole of my adult life, I have been dismayed at what I have seen happening in the leadership of our country. People with passions and opinions deemed unpalatable are shuffled to the backbench or screened from candidacy altogether. Breezy promises are made to secure power, and then even the good ones are cast aside if the work is too hard, an actual cost associated, or a political price to be paid. Party discipline is wielded not with the goal of effective governance, but for the purpose of keeping power. The status quo is, to me, maddening, and I have for years found myself reluctant to engage with or support any federal party or leadership. It is a battle every time it comes around. Then I met Electoral Reform. She was beautiful, intelligent, articulate, focused on healthy renewal and change. Her passion was mine, valuing healthy process, courageous leadership, nonpartisan collaboration in the work of making good and wise decisions for the good of our country. She prefers the healthy change, not the bulldozer, and was willing to challenge in ways big and small. Her latest project was proportional representation. It would represent a fairly large shakeup of the current system. Every vote would count, and every voice would be heard. There was a possibility of a greater diversity of voices and perspectives more freely represented in Parliament. Other countries were doing it, and it was working. Never perfectly, but relatively well. Let's try it here, she said. Alas, it was not to be. Her project was unilaterally taken to the shed out back and given the axe treatment by our Prime Minister.
Shame!
And Electoral Reform, a voice of passion and beauty that spoke to us and gave us hope, was relegated past the backbench to some broom closet somewhere on Parliament Hill. So we grieve today at this terrible loss. And we will try not to concede to the forces of anger and despair and gloom that readily accomplish such a crushing rebuke of hope. So together, let us return to the big tents where we are told to go, to check our passions and convictions, ideas and questions at the door, and to blindly shackle ourselves to the agendas of the leadership in the back room. Because they know best, and so that our tent will win. And inside us, we will cry and grieve the lady who has been silenced. Is there hope for resurrection? Can she be rescued and her project revived? The cynical side of me sees that when the tent leadership deems it appropriate, they will call her out of the broom closet once again to parade in front of us, to excite us and renew hope, only to lock her up again once we raise them to power. That's what my cynical side says. Or perhaps she can still be rescued if we demand it. What say you here? What say we here?
So south of the border, we're seeing some pretty compelling drama these days about the importance of values, especially the importance of equality and political participation as well to democratic politics. Those values, equality and political participation, representing the diversity of our societies and our legislatures, should be just as important when it comes to how we elect governments. For generations now, Canadians have elected governments through a system designed and preferred by elites and the dominant political parties they've supported. Their system has failed to deliver voter equality. It has failed to embrace and represent Canada's diversity in legislatures, and it hasn't helped at all with respect to increasing political participation through the ballot box in this country. But it has served their interests in guarding their power very well indeed. It has served the people poorly if you believe in the democratic principle that the composition of our legislatures should accurately reflect the electorate's opinion of the parties who compete for your support. So how poorly are we served? Here's an example for you. Ask the 41% of Canadian voters in the 4 Atlantic provinces, more than 540,000 voters, who didn't vote Liberal in the 2015 election. How many non-Liberal MPs did more than 500,000 votes elect in Atlantic Canada? Zero. None. Not one MP from the New Democrats, the Greens, or the Conservatives was elected in Atlantic Canada. Wouldn't you agree that this is simply unfair and unjust? The Federal Liberal Party promised us a brighter, more equal electoral future during the last election. Prime Minister Trudeau has betrayed that commitment. He has cynically abandoned that commitment. He now drapes himself in the Canadian flag and says he can't consider a fairer electoral system because it would threaten Canadian unity and it would threaten Canadian stability. Like fearmongers in the past and in other countries, he says he needs to protect us from extremist voices, in his words, and fringe elements. This is exactly the argument those who oppose the abolition of slavery would have made centuries ago. In electoral politics, some of the features we now regard as normal, such as the voting rights of women, or Asian Canadians, or First Nations, once were championed by who? Extremist voices and fringe elements.